Welcome back to the 7th grade Mustache. On today's episode, we'll be speaking about tree rings. Muscles develop a lasting molecular memory of past resistance exercises that helps them bounce back from long periods of inactivity. Muscle memory describes the ability to regain muscle mass in previously trained muscles. This means that once you gain muscle mass through strength training, if you lose it after taking time off from training, you can regain the muscle mass faster than the amount of time that it took to put it on in the first place. Researchers have found that neuron networks created by frequently repeated skills likely become redundant as the skill is refined, which may partially explain the persistence of motor memory. They speculate that even if the specific neurons associated with the skill's initial development were suppressed, the brain would find another way to perform the movement. Think of memory like a highway. If Interstates 75 and 85 are both closed, you could still get to Atlanta from Tennessee or South Carolina, but it would take a lot longer. Researchers hope to find out whether diseases like Parkinson's are the result of memory blockage, a motor memory traffic jam, so to speak, or if the disease destroys the memory highway associated with movement skills.
Now that movement skills, that's a real thing. When you start working on different martial arts, you got to do 10,000 kicks, 10,000 punches.
Right, exactly.
And so in muscle memory, you discussed it has the ability for you to get your mass back quickly, but also what happens when you do that, your reflex it becomes a trained reflex. Mm-hmm. So like sometimes you catch yourself blocking or doing some shit, or like, somebody wants to spar with you and you hate that. It's like, hey, nah, or like, somebody else. And then you'll fuck around and you hurt them and you feel bad. Like, hey, dude, I told you, you can't take one of my kicks, or, people tell kick as hard as you can. Or
here's the deal with that, though. With certain martial arts, you can develop a sensitivity to energy. And Wing Chun is a very good example of that. So
yes.
You can, while you're from the first day you begin training, you develop a sensitivity to the energy of your opponent and your own energy. And it's something as simple as your stance, practicing your stance, where in Wing Chun, it shifts, but normally you have 60 on the back foot and 40 on the front foot. And that shift on the center line, which divides your body from left to right in Wing Chun, being aware of this, you're constantly thinking about your balance. And so that when you are sparring with people, this translates further into rolling hands, which is the close quarter combat training style of Wing Chun with another person.
Yeah, from move to move. But the thing is, like, you unconsciously do a combo. You'll do 3 or 4 hits, and I broke somebody's thumb like that one. And this chick is, trying to roll with me, like, chill. And then she's like, no, I train boxing. Next thing I know, I broke her thumb because I'm blocking and I'm parrying, and I'm like, oh, look, see, I told you. And like you said, I knew her energy wasn't as good as mine, but her confidence was there. And I pulled my punches, yes, but even pulling your punches, you still damage somebody. But that's what the training is for. Look, the point.
But wait, see, the better you are at controlling your energy, the more you've mastered your own body.
I thought I was doing her a favor. She was like, come on, I can take it. Okay. But no, but that's what comes from training. This comes from repetition. And the reason it's so important, because you think we're living in a physical world, and we are, but it's also important mentally, because, when you do encounter difficult things at work, a police stop, highly stressful situation, you can bounce back. You know how to deal with it. You recognize, okay, I need to turn it down, but then this argument shouldn't be had here in the street. It should be had in a courtroom. Different stuff like that. It gives you the ability to react appropriately. That's why it's so important.
Right. But with the concept of tree rings, if you understand the way that trees grow, if you cut down a tree and you look at the cross section, you can see these concentric circles, or these circles that grow out from the center. And these circles are what climate scientists have used to determine if there was a long period of cold weather or if there was a drought, because based on the thickness of the tree rings. And so with these tree rings, you can tell, okay, well, there was a bad winter, so there was very little to no growth, because the colder it is, the slower plant life grows. And so that means there's going to be a very thin tree ring. But when it's warm and it's good seasons of growth, then you get these big, thick tree rings. It continues outward. Now, all trees don't have tree rings. Palm trees don't have tree rings because they're always in a state of constant growth, and the temperature around the equator is relatively the same all throughout the year, and the amount of sunlight stays mostly the same, around 12 hours most of the year.
I think a big part of that, a lot of those that we think are trees are like plants, like a banana tree. Banana tree is a plant, so it doesn't have rings in the same sense. Mm-hmm. And like you said, the constant growth and the bark is different. So a lot of those that we think are trees are plants, of course. But what I'm saying that there are specific that are plants that don't have the same kind of growth patterns. But the tree rings still tell a story. It has to do with experience. It has to do with you growing as a person. We got those same things. Sometimes we have mental scars, but that's what you hope to gain is experience.
People are like trees in that way because you can look at a person and tell roughly how old they are by looking at their face, by looking at the wear and tear in their face, the aging in their face, specifically the eyes. The eyes are the tree ring of the face because most people can be deceptively younger looking than their biological age. The biological age is the speed at which the decay is happening within your body. Your chronological age is the year and moment and date that you were born.
Yeah, the trips around the sun, yeah.
But researchers have been finding is that based on how much you exercise, how well you eat, you can slow down your biological aging. That's why people of color, mostly people with melanin, tend to age slower than other races. And black people in particular, they always say black don't crack. Well, there's reasons why that black people age slower. Melanin has a lot to do with it, but also the epigenetic training that has happened in the past, which has caused people to become more durable and hardy to their environment. So let's talk about epigenetics for a second. So in an experiment reminiscent of Clockwork Orange, the movie, researchers trained male mice to fear a cherry blossom-like scent called acetophenone by inducing slight electric shocks every time the smell wafted into the animals' cages. After 10 days of this treatment, whenever cherry blossoms were in the air, they report the mice trained to fear it went on edge. The researchers found that those mice developed more smell receptors associated with that particular scent, which allowed them to detect it at lower concentrations. Additionally, when researchers examined those male sperm, they found that the gene responsible for acetophenone detection was packaged differently compared to the same gene in control mice.
Passed on to the next generation if necessary.
After imprinting those males with the fear of acetophenone, the researchers inseminated females with the scared mice sperm. The baby mice never met their father, but those sired by a blossom-hating dad had more acetophenone smell receptors compared to pups born from other dads. Most were also agitated when acetophenone filled the air. This same finding held true for those original males' grandchildren. Information transfer from one generation to another may play a role in human diseases such as obesity, diabetes, and psychiatric disorders. So that brings us to the next part of this conversation. There was a research paper that was published in 2020, and it's called The Genetic Consequences of Transatlantic Slave Trade in the Americas. And it was published by the American Journal of Human Genetics. It was also referenced by the BBC on July 24th, 2020.
I think I'm a little bit familiar with that paper, or I read a similar one, but one of the big things they talked about was the high blood pressure and the fact that high blood pressure is a byproduct of slavery in the African American community because when you work out, you lose sodium through sweat. So you become more sensitive and your body actually retains sodium.
Yeah, but high blood pressure mainly comes from stress.
Yes. So that was very stressful coming across the ocean and being forced to work. Yes. But the retention part of the sodium, how we metabolize sodium. Oh, they think it was directly related to the transatlantic slave trade because we didn't have those same issues in Africa. If that was the case, Africans to this day would have high blood pressure, but they don't. That's not customary. So yeah, it has to do with both stress and diet, and but that is a product of that. So the idea that when you ask for reparations, that you're not still being affected, yeah, genetically we're still being affected to this day. That's something that took place 200, 300 years ago. Yeah, there's a lot of things still affecting us, and like you said, literally, it gets passed on from generation to generation.
A major DNA study has shed new light on the fate of millions of Africans who were traded as slaves to the Americas between the 16th and 19th centuries. More than 50,000 people took part in the study, which is able to identify more details of the genetic impact the trade has had on present-day populations in the Americas. It lays bare the consequences of rape, maltreatment, disease, and racism. More than 12.5 million Africans were traded between 1515 and the mid-19th century. So I want to stop right there. They're starting at 1515. Now, that was between America and Africa, but slavery started in the 1400s with the Portuguese. So let's go ahead and get that correct right now. Now, they're probably traveling up the Barbary Coast all the way into the Mediterranean and into Europe. But the Portuguese started the slave trade in the 1400s. So 2 million of the enslaved men and women, 2 million of the enslaved men, women, and children died on the way to the Americas. Many were sent to work in rice plantations where malaria and other dangerous conditions were rampant. And in later years, large numbers of children were sent, many of whom did not survive the crossing. In Latin America, up to 17 African women for every African man contributed to the gene pool. Researchers put this down in part of a policy called branqueamiento. It's a Spanish word. It's spelled branqueamento. Branqueamiento. Racial whitening. Branqueamiento. Racial whitening.
What year are we talking?
This is in the 1700s.
Okay.
So this racial whitening in a number of countries, which actively encouraged the immigration of European men with the intention to dilute African ancestry through reproduction. The study highlighted the practice of coercing enslaved people to having children as a means of maintaining an enslaved workforce, nearing the abolition of the transatlantic trade. In the U.S., women were often promised freedom in return for reproducing, and racist policies opposing the mixing of different races.
Those were the misogynistic laws they had in the 1600s, where if you were a slave, so you're white.
Hey man, listen. The Spanish were evil pieces of shit, straight up. What they did to the indigenous peoples of South America, Central America, and North, everywhere they went, they spread evil. Okay, and so the shit that they did to African people, let alone the indigenous people in South America and Central America, has not been talked about enough. And it's part of the reason, mostly the driving force behind the colorism that you see in Latin America that still exists today. So this branqueamiento and trying to breed out the African genes, it's their MO. But what's so funny about this is that those African genes can't be eliminated. They will not give up. And I'll tell you how. So my buddy was from Venezuela. He had dark hair, but he looked like a Spaniard. You know what I'm saying? His sister looked like Faith Evans, like a light-skinned black woman. Like, when I saw his sister, I was like, damn, she is fine. You know what I'm saying? Right.
I know you blacks. Yeah, I've been around.
I brought it up a couple times, fucking with him and shit. And he had a good sense of humor. But I could tell, like, oh yeah, y'all have African genes in your blood. But what's funny though, when you look at these Latin American countries, it's the women that carry these genes. Like, if you go to
the hair, you see the
Dominican Republic. If you go to Dominican Republic, you'll see the same thing. You'll see
my daughter just got back.
These fair-skinned boys in the same family with girls who have these African features, and the women pass the recessive gene. You look at two fair-skinned Latin American people, and they might have a baby, and that baby will have a fat African booty and some Negro lips, and I'm like, oh. But the fucked up part is that black child will catch hell in that culture because they have this sunken place mentality where black is evil, black is wrong. You know, it's crazy because even in like literature, you hear about this. There was a book that was written about the life of Che Guevara, and he had like a housemaid. He had a housemaid, or no, he had a girlfriend who had a housemaid, and they called her Negrita, the black girl.
Yeah, little.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, but you know, when the way they described her though, like she is basically a light-skinned black woman. She wasn't dark-skinned, you know. So it's like, oh, even light-skinned black people are black to them.
Look, but people forget Che was racist. Very, you know, he didn't like if you came from the was it sub-Saharan Africa that you were subpar and all that shit. But the part that you talked about that I thought was very important was when you mentioned, so you were talking about it from the point of view that they were trying to breed the black out. No, they weren't trying to breed the black out. They were trying to control people through the mixing of races. So I'm a white man and I have a kid. See, this is the argument that people never want to have because you know, you're at work. I know some people. The first thing I can't be racist because my wife is black. I can't be racist because I have a kid by a white man. Sexual domination is part of racism. You know what I'm saying? Sexual domination is part of white supremacy. And when you just talked about it, no, I don't want people to miss that the mixing of races was by intent. That movie, The Rabbit-Proof Fence, they talk about, because people let us say the Aborigines have this kind of hair. Much of their hair is because of rapes. They had those fucking orphanages where these white men would come and rape them girls, and now all of a sudden you introduce that white gene in there, and so, you know, people don't realize that was on purpose. That was not by accident. And then what you do is like all of a sudden, oh yeah, the Dutch were already over here and this, that, and other. But many times the mixing of races was to control the slaves. It was not just to get you an heir. It was because that was one way to, because now this mixed child has a conflict because, oh, I'm not quite black, but I'm white enough, or I'm this, and so that was by design. That was a form of manipulation and control. So. Also, the same thing when you have a class system within that, where quadroons, freeroons, and all these, you know, I don't like using those words, but that was one way to control the masses. And we see that in New Orleans. You know, you see it in different places, but it was not by accident. That was on purpose. And you know, like you just said, that little Negrita, she caught hell, and she was still light skinned. So. That's one way that they control people by, okay, you're not good enough. Or
but
you're not
see, what's crazy now is like they always try to gaslight you into saying, oh, we're not racist. Motherfucker, yes, you are. There's movies you can watch from these Latin American countries that have black characters in there. And for example, you see some shit like, there'll be like a cop movie or some type of crime movie, and it'll be some fair-skinned Hispanic dudes dragging a black dude on the ground like a sack of potatoes. It's all this derogatory, you know, deprecating type of shit. You know what I'm saying? And like when
they want our traits, but they don't want the skin color. Like you see the big titties, the beautiful Latin American woman, but she has all these traits of a black woman except for the skin color. Or the hair is slightly different. You see with the men too, like a big athletic dude, you just don't want him to be dark. Like you just don't want that. Or and I think the other thing that we talk about on our podcast,
Sammy Sosa is a perfect example of sunken place mentality. I hate my black skin bullshit. The problem with this,
you would not recognize him now.
Yeah, because he's Captain Pepto-Bismol now, because he bleached his skin to look all fucking weird, like he's made out of bubble gum. But
you may forget what I was going to say.
But
because I see him, because you can't unsee that. You can't unsee it. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. But he comes from a culture where if you black, you need to get rid of that shit. You need to whiten your skin. Now, what's fucked up is even in Africa, in these countries that have been colonized, you have black women that bleach their skin.
Look, people say it's a moral issue. It's not a moral issue. I don't like it. It's not for me. I'm not trying to criticize those people because I'm going to say they've been brainwashed. But the fact is this, Little Kim said the same thing. She was like, look, you know, these guys weren't giving me any attention, but then I do this and all of a sudden I get attention. So you want to be liked. You want to be, now you see it backfired and so much surgery fucks with you. But the fact of the matter is that we have a desire to be liked and to be loved and to be adorned. And all of a sudden when you have now you have the money and the ability, or they're pushing these products, and that shit is bad for you. I mean, they said that shit causes all kinds of other issues besides just the skin lightening. Um, I think the other thing that we talk, like I said, we talk about on the podcast is how they throw that slavery narrative. Like whenever you find these people in South America, Central America, Micronesia, even Japan, like with the first black samurai, but they don't talk about the first shogun being black. They don't talk about Timimoro, I can't say it, but they love to throw that slave narrative. So whenever you see a black person pop up someplace where they're not supposed to be, they had to be a slave. So
that's that bullshit right there, man.
Yes, because like I said, when you start doing the research, we talk again. I don't like hashing stuff, but we said in the past, but it's really important to realize the original inhabitants of South America and Mexico were black people, and when they did the DNA test 50, 60,000 years ago, they had Aboriginal DNA. That means they came from the Solomon Islands, came from
it's
Australia.
Because everybody grows up in the West with this Rockefeller school system.
Yes.
Teaching.
Oh my God. Yes. Because they funded the education system. They funded the healthcare system. The slavery narrative is a catch-all. And that's why it's really important to know when those pilgrims came over, the Queen gave them permission to enslave the people that were here because they weren't Christian. So the first slaves were the people that they encountered when they got here. So when you see that stuff down in the Dominican Republic, in Haiti, they had sugar plantations. When they went down there, they forced the natives to work, and the natives started dying off at a fast rate. What did they do? They brought Africans, not because they were African, because they looked like the people that they already had here. So you don't hear that Aboriginal's tale that we were already crossing the barrier of the ocean, yada yada yada. But I'm just simply saying that whenever you see a black person in the Central South America and Mexico, all of a sudden they had to be a slave, or you had slave. And so that's another reason that people don't want to talk about people being black in their family, is because, well, my grandmama was a slave. No, she wasn't. Many of us were already over here, and that's the whole conversation they don't want to have. And so that's embarrassing to say that you were a slave. That's embarrassing to say that this person was a slave. But And that's just how they use that guilt and that embarrassment to permeate and to further white supremacy, to further racism. And so, like I said, that's how they get you. And the same thing when you see the same thing in Asia. Was it Miss Madagascar who was all light skinned, but then you get in there. Miss Malaysia. Miss Malaysia. You got over there. Yeah, all these dark motherfuckers on the street. Like shit. This is not what we were taught. And it's intentional. And the whitening of the world, going back to the 1500s, was on purpose. And I just think we think so much shit is by accident. And I just think that also, like I said, people love to say that, well, I can't be racist because of this. Like, actually,
well, right now, this is actually happening in Sudan, northern Sudan, and they had to create southern Sudan because the Muslims, the Arabs had come over there. And they are bringing these extremist groups, these militias, and they were taking over whole parts of northern Sudan and claiming it for themselves. And so it pushed out like a lot of the indigenous African people, well, the African population there that had been there for thousands of years. But with civil war and violence, it pushed them to the south. And so now you have South Sudan, which is a country compared to what used to be just regular Sudan.
The entire Sudan.
And so then you have these Arabs who come in here with these policies that are just like the Spaniards. And so they're trying to do this ethnic cleansing to get rid of these black people, these black Africans. So crazy part is George Clooney was making a big deal about this, but nobody would listen to him. He was going to the UN, he was going to these different militaries around the world trying to get help. And he was the one celebrity that put his weight behind this and was like, yo, this is genocide that's going on and nobody's fucking doing anything about it. So
look, like I said, we've seen that shit other places. Hell, I didn't realize the Congo was still run and owned by France right now, and that France gets so many billions of dollars. Like, I don't know how to fix it or solve it, but I think that America does turn a blind eye because we're arrogant, whatever. But we've been miseducated. We think that slavery's over and we're good to go, or you just described the situation in the Sudan. You got these people in America that are big on gun control, but that's one thing that that having a weapon stops is that an invading army can't just walk up on you. You can't just even the police, when you have a weapon, they treat you differently, and that's one way to solve this. But we get wrapped up in court over bullshit, and well, people who would make up their mind to do something illegal, you passing a new law ain't gonna change that. You need to be able to defend yourself. You know, what happens if Canada invades us? What happens if these Mexican cartels come up here and invade us? You know, and you sit here and like, oh, you know, you should be able to have 8 rounds and that's it. Man, fuck you, dude. Look at how these other people are treated when they can't defend themselves. Those are peaceful people. This is their land. My mama been on this land. My family been on this land. So of course they don't feel like they need a weapon. But then all of a sudden you got some Arabs coming in here who have been invading for years. They have it down to a science. You know, they know how to force their religion and culture on you.
The domestic slave trade in the United States between 1790 and 1860 would see the transportation of millions of enslaved people across the southeastern states. The Trail of Tears would force Native Americans and Africans that they married or owned as slaves westward to Oklahoma. The great migrations that occurred between 1916 and 1970 to escape segregation and poor economic conditions would bring former slaves and their descendants to all parts of the Northeast and the Midwest United States. Similar movements occurred elsewhere, such as migrations from northeastern Brazil to southern and central Brazil. So basically from Bahia and Pernambuco to Rio de Janeiro. So let me just stop here for a second, because that would have to be some fucked up ass shit to be a African who was probably enslaved and then gets bought by Native Americans. And I'm like, man, you look like me. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
That's a complicated conversation.
I know it's a complicated conversation, but that's why I'm talking about the shit, because
no.
You're in this situation where it's like, yo, I want to get the fuck out of here. I want to be free. But this motherfucker that's like 2 shades away from me is buying me to go work for them. I'm like, dude, set me free.
Here's where the racism comes in. So when they were putting you on that ledger or on that roll, it was called the Dawes rolls. So there were 3 brothers, the Dawes brothers, and they went through and they looked at you. And if you was dark, they said that you were a freeman or that you were a slave and you belonged to them. So we don't know the actual ethnic component of those tribes, because we don't know if because all they did was look at you. So if you were light enough and had a big enough nose, they said you were Indian. But if you was dark enough and had fat enough lips, they said you were a slave. But we don't know the true genetic makeup of those people. And the reason we say that, the reason I'm saying that, excuse me, is because you have those things called the $5 Indians. So you had a lot of people claiming to be Indian, but they weren't. So what happened was you had white folks, Italians, and all these other people. They said, hey, I want those benefits that Indians get. So they would pay $5 to them cats to get put on that ledger.
And that is how I go to my bank, and the black tellers that work there tell me there are white people coming in, cashing checks from their federal government because they belong to an Indian tribe. I'm like, ain't this a bitch?
Now, okay. So, like I said, you got to go back further to have this conversation. Now, first things first, Oklahoma was called Lincoln Territory. Oklahoma was going to be the first black state, the only black state. That was the actual thing. But when they found out, we talked about this in the past, they found out there was oil there. So when you see these Native Americans in the 1920s driving those Rolls Royces, that's not some kind of bullshit. That was a real deal. They sent their asses to Oklahoma thinking they were fucking them, because that clay, you can't grow shit down there. But you get down there and they got oil, changed everything. White folks started stealing the oil from them. But let's talk about the Cherokee. So the Cherokee, so I've talked about this in 1933. They found a Egyptian temple in Tennessee. So these white folks get there. This ain't supposed to be there, and so they're all trying to negotiate it away mentally. But they find that there's a big pot. The pot, they have it in the museum, has the purple dye on it. That purple dye came from who? You know this, the Phoenicians. We talked about it in the past. But what's really important is when they spoke to the big chief, the Cherokee big chief, he told them who was there before them. They said, yeah, the tall black people. We ran them off to the mountains. That story that tells you there were Egyptians already over here. So what I'm saying, when you talk about the composition of these people, Slavery is not what brought everybody to this continent, but that's the story they tell us, and that's how you dismiss your history and your birthright. Now, we talked about the Gullah people. We talked about all these different Native American tribes, how dark they are. And like I said, we've been brainwashed to throw slavery into everything. But a lot of the motherfuckers was dark to begin with. And that's what nobody wants to understand. So when you talk about those Dawes rolls, you talk about the Seminoles, the Seminole tribe. They had moved 3 or 4 times. They moved from Georgia to Florida, from Florida to someplace else, and they said they took their slaves with them. But we don't. How do you know that they were actual slaves or they weren't original tribe members? Because that's not what we were taught. So again, just because you brown does not make you a slave. Just because you dark don't make you a slave. On the flip side, they enslaved the original inhabitants of this nation to do their work. And so right now, we don't know if we have a birthright or not.
Right. And that's another thing where, it's it's one of those situations where you have to go and dig these things up for yourself because you're raised on a narrative that nobody owes you anything. You don't have any rights. And
that narrative is a motherfucker, ain't it?
It is.
That's some deep shit. Like, we subscribe to a narrative, not reality.
It is the oldest gaslighting project in America.
We're laughing, but it's not funny. Look, like I said, one of the reasons we do this podcast is so we can talk about shit before everybody else does. The 2 big things that's going on in Congress right now is this whole pistol brace ban, like a whole gun argument. I get it. If my best friend's dad is a preacher. He was my preacher in my church. But the funniest thing I learned from him was that he's a pacifist. He doesn't believe in guns, but he has no problem with you having it. Why do people who don't like guns don't want anybody else to have them? Because nobody wants to have this conversation. You are pussy. A lot of these motherfuckers was raised to be pussies. And because they were raised to be pussies, they think you should be too. That's not cool. I just saw a gun debate where it was like, I think she's like a Puerto Rican lady, and she's talking about what's going on in Florida, and there was a home invasion where these 2 guys come in with 2 ARs. And so she's asking this black man what she should do. You know what he said? He said, you should get out the house. That was his argument. To this, she's like, look, no, you should get out the house. So there's bad guys in a car with guns, bad guys coming into my house, and I should just get out the house. Like, she's like, no, I stand my ground. I got an AR. So, but what I'm saying is you see these, they love to promote these black journalists, these black writers, males who are straight pussy. And it drives me crazy because some kind of way, like, they love to put the Martin Luther King narrative, even though we know now Martin Luther King applied for a concealed carry. We know Martin Luther King had armed bodyguards. We know this now. But when we were 7, 8 years old and we were told about him marching to Selma and marching this and marching that. Yeah. So I'm trying to tell people, if you want to be able to fight somebody off, you need to have the most technology you can have at your disposal to do so. And an AR-15 is the lick. The other thing that me and you talked about, they are literally, I don't know who needs to do something about this Bill Gates guy, but we know he bought up all this farmland. We know he's pushing this damn preservative on us called appeal. But what we didn't know that he's going to Congress right now, that if you have a garden, you have to register your garden. And now they try to do it for commerce. They said that you need to register your garden because we don't want you selling that stuff. But no, that's not it. They're trying to put stuff in your food that you don't want. And it's coming. Look the shit up. You can't even say the words anymore because if I say the words, we get canceled. But look that shit up.
So check this out. So my motivation for this episode is to think of human experience from a paleontological perspective, meaning your upbringing, your ancestors, your biological DNA code and all that. And
your genetics and your culture.
And then there is your day-to-day lived experiences that you go through, you will pass on to your kin or your forebears, or even through the weird, entangled quantum mechanical way that you pass it on to your nieces and nephews or somebody else. And so let's talk about intuition and experience. So the first half of the show was about, genes, and this person was brought over here and experienced this, and epigenetically this was superimposed into the bloodline of this person and these people, and now they pass this on to their forebears. But there's another layer to that, because each of those people who experienced those things had their own day-to-day lives. And just like you, they had to navigate that landscape and survive so that they could pass on whatever they had to the people that came after them. So intuition exists in all of us, whether we acknowledge it or not. And the more we can learn about it, the more we can use it to shape our lives for the better. So the human brain has two operating systems. First is the quick and instinctual and effortless version. And then the second one is the slower to respond, more analytical, deliberate, and conscious version. And so with the intuition, it's a form of knowledge that appears in consciousness without obvious deliberation. It's not magical, but rather a faculty in which hunches are generated by the unconscious mind, rapidly sifting through past experience and cumulative knowledge. It is the pattern matching process that quickly suggests feasible courses of action. Recent experiences are added to your bank of memories and intuition. It only became intuitive because you developed that skill set through experience. It's based on the number of trials, the number of experiences you have to say, yep, I've seen these sorts of things before, or there's an anomaly, or you say, this looks odd, I haven't seen this before, I wonder what's going on here.
But your brain does it unconsciously. It's a pattern machine. It detects them and creates them. Sometimes you don't even realize it. And so when that intuition kicks in, many times it might be genetic in nature. You might be experiencing something somebody else experienced down your lineage, and you don't even realize it. You know what I'm saying? You don't recognize that. Hey, man, I need to get the fuck out of here. I'm sensing something.
But
my spider sense is tingling.
There's that. Then there's also the epigenetically imprinted information in your genes that say, oh, well, I don't like the water. I don't know why. And perhaps there was an ancestor that drowned to death. And so now that fear of large bodies of water is now imprinted on that person.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that versus intuition. So these are very quiet conversations that go on the quantum level inside the DNA. And so people begin to develop this bank of experiences in their day-to-day lived lives. And so there's a lot of times in your life where you have that, what they call Spidey sense or Spider-Man sense that tells you, this doesn't feel right. And it may be something that you have not experienced ever. But see, what's happening there, if you just think this is all a physical thing, you're a fool, because your spirit body, your spirit man, actually is like a drone scout that kind of surveys the landscape and sees stuff coming before you get into it. How many times have you avoided car accidents? How many times have you avoided a situation that you haven't experienced before, that you said, all right, I'm going to go this way. I'm going to make this left turn because it feels safer. And then you drive past that block that you turned away from and you see dangerous shit going on down there, or a shootout, or a house on fire, or anything. And so those things are a bit harder to explain because it's intuition, but it's also a form of communication that has not been documented. So consciousness studies are the realm that has not been explored by most of the academic elite in this country or around the world. And so these types of studies,
or they study it and they dismiss it because they can't.
They call it anecdotal.
Yeah,
like
they
out of body experiences. So there's people who have had out of body experiences and were able to recount conversations that other people had in the room while that person was unconscious. But researchers will just simply call that anecdotal and non-repeatable. And it's because they're using the scientific method to prove something that is not scientific. And so it makes it a slippery slope and very hard to nail down, so to speak. And so when you get these situations like out of body experiences or premonitions, see premonition happens before intuition. So then a premonition is like, yo, I had this feeling something was about to happen. How many times have you thought about somebody and the phone would ring, or you would get a text message and it would be that person?
How about this one? Since we talked about the Caribbean, oh boy, this guy Pat Roberts or whatever, wasn't he the one that said that Haiti was evil and that they used voodoo and stuff to get out of slavery? And I'm like, how come slavery wasn't the problem? How come you white people weren't evil for having enslaved the native culture and brought other people
Right.
there?
So he basically gave a pass to slavery and said voodoo was worse than slavery.
Yeah. So Oshun. Yeah, that's who they. Because when you invoke Oshun, ain't no negotiate. You understand what I'm saying? Like so when these people who were oppressed, who were being killed, and hey, if you want to know how bad, look up that Rochambeau, that French general. Look what he was doing to them people. Look what he did to the mixed people. Remember he had that party with all them wives, and he invited the wives to the party, the wives of these head dudes. And when they got there, he showed them the heads of their husbands to keep them in line. And you saying that we were wrong for trying to get out of slavery, or we were wrong to invoke some shit from back home to end this shit? That's yeah, man. That's how fucked up and brainwashed you white folks are. Because the Christianity.
No, he's basically saying you're not fighting fair, and so we're not fighting fair against a people that use ships with cannons and guns and soldiers and endless supplies and resources to enslave people, but you're worried about fighting fair? Get the fuck out of here.
The reason I brought it up is because like, you just said that's when these scientists can't find stuff. They say it's anecdotal. Well, Haitian Revolution was an anecdotal. You understand what I'm saying? Like literally these people prayed and fought the way they knew how. They used guerrilla warfare. They used different techniques. Macandog killed 3,000 people by poisoning them. And the first thing he killed the sympathizers first. Then he started killing the French. But like I said, the point I'm making is that you want proof of these results. You know, these people are agnostic, basically. Like, look, I need proof, but there's proof sitting right there. They just don't want to acknowledge the proof because it's not proving what they wanted to prove. Like I said, Roscoe, you're talking about some deep shit, but you're right that these people they have proof, but it's not the proof they want. You know, so they dismiss it. Ain't no big deal. This is bullshit.
But you have to be careful not to adopt the ideology of people like that and keep a neutral, skeptical mind.
When they run the media, when like one of the things that like me and you will learn stuff, and we've learned stuff, but then they'll make a movie that's inaccurate, and after me and you die, they'll still be showing that inaccurate movie. We laugh, but that's what next generations are going to see. Like we know Christopher Columbus didn't go down the way they said, or like you know you see that movie and we know this guy's a piece of shit now. But once this narrative is gone, where he killed a bunch of natives, he never set foot in America, in North America. We recognize that. Hey, some people said he was black. Some people said that nigga was a Jew. Some people said, but the fact of the matter is, what these kids are going to remember is that movie with them white people in it. And you know, we can teach our kids, but then all it takes is a couple years of absence of that narrative, or that you know he was a bad guy. Next thing you know, he's a good guy. Knights of Columbus everywhere, motherfucker. What? That kind of shit. And like I said, that media lasts a lot longer than the people. And the deepest thing, like I said, you talk about the jinn, and you said that many people memorize the Quran because they said the jinn can go back in time. And that's so fucking profound, my nigga. And I don't think you get enough credit for saying that. But I just think it's really crazy that we got to pass it down from generation to generation. You got to educate your own people. It's been proven that children who know their own story, like the story of how their family got here, and they behave differently. Like, you know, I had my great aunt until she was 104, so I could just ask her a question. She would tell, you know, who came here. You know, Papa John came from Africa, but his last name was Hayes. Hayes is a Hebrew name. When you start doing that research, you taught me a lot about my own last name Morrow, which is a Moor name, but Morrow spelled that way is Scottish. So like, oh damn. So once you learn about yourself, can't nobody tell you about you. When you know who you are, can't nobody tell you that you a girl. Can't nobody tell you that you're this or that. So it's really important
But
that
it's
you understand your own
important,
identity
important that you learn as much as you can
about
about
yourself.
where you come from and about where your people come from, because we're moving into a time where the truth is liquid. It's not fixed.
Mm.
And people are erasing libraries. People are erasing the existence of people if it doesn't fit with a narrative. This has happened before in history. This book burning has happened before. But
Oh
it's
boy, said that
important
same
that you
thing.
gather this information.
You don't have to burn the book if you take it out the library. We chuckle, we laugh. Library at Alexandria, prime example. The only motherfuckers that know what was in there might be the Catholic Church, because the rest of us can't get it. But we know some shit.
Or
Um,
they took the books and just burned the library.
they kept the information for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, the
Um,
Library of the Vatican is vast. It goes on for miles,
Miles
and
underground.
it's
Look,
underground.
for
And you got
those
to
for
have special ass permission to go up in there.
oh just to enter it, not even to read anything. But what I was going to say is, if you're Native American descent, if you're from Mexico, and I'm not talking about the Spanish, I'm talking about if you're from that, look up that not the Pope, but the bishop or the cardinal that burned all your books. See, we're taught that Native Americans didn't have books. That's a lie. Native American books were deemed to be satanic and were burned by different cardinals and different popes and different bishops. But when you realize that there was book burning going on, and the person that brought it to my attention was Ivan Van Sertima, where he said we still have the codexes. And you're like, the codex? How? I thought, yeah, we're told that Native Americans didn't write. No, they had a written language, and the only thing that survived were the certain codexes that explained the different hierarchy of the priests from that religion. But these other books were all burned. So by doing that, we honestly don't know, who was who and what was going on and how much information they had. So it's really important to understand that book burning shit needs to be eliminated. You might not agree with what that book says, and there's certain books. It's like a rated R movie. Certain books are not for little kids. Certain movies are not for little kids, and I don't like seeing that shit in the grade school. I dig that, but once you get to high school and you start to go to college, yeah, y'all need to give everybody everything so they can understand for themselves and discernment and these different things. But they love to. Like right now, you can't say certain words on right now. You become demonetized, or you lose your podcast, or you lose. So that right there, that's book burning. Y'all just need to be aware of it.
Oh yes, book burning in the digital age, for sure it happens, because these voices of dissent, or people who disagree with them, they want to get rid of that. They want everybody to be singing the same song, drinking that Jim Jones Kool-Aid. And it's a cult of personality. It's a cult of truth. It's a straight up cult. But knowing your rights is not enough,
No,
because
no, that's
knowing your
deep.
rights is just saying, okay, I know what the rules are. Well, what if they keep changing the fucking rules?
You have
You
to
have
execute your
to
rights. You got
execute
to
your
use them.
rights to keep
Yes.
your rights. So you have to go out there and speak truth to power. You have to fight, and you have to make
So,
you have to go and speak to people in power and tell them, hey, you are not spending my money the way I want you to. Either you're going to do your job, you're going to exercise the will of the people, or you will be exercised from your seat of office.
look, the reason I brought up the two conversations I brought up about the pistol brace, literally. So this pistol brace thing is they're saying that it's illegal to have this on the gun, but I bought it. I bought that with the gun. The numbers are kind of skewed because you have some people saying that there are 3 million people with pistol braces. There's some people saying there's 40 million people with pistol braces. The government made it so that if you wanted to have this brace on your gun, that you had to register it. So people are doing a civil disobedience right now against the ATF. Only 200,000 people register their guns. That's less than 1%. If we're talking about 5 million or 40 million people that have this pistol brace. But the reason I'm bringing that up because That's really important to understand. Right now, you got somebody trying to make you register your garden. Every person in America, I get it. You might not go to Congress, you might not, but you got to be careful about these Democrats because that's what they're
Hold on a
doing.
second. Explain why a pistol brace is so dangerous to people.
It's not. That's the whole thing. But the Democrats
Well,
have you believing.
explain the controversy of a pistol
Yeah,
brace and why it's advantageous to even buy one.
all it, the pistol brace, not a stock, but the pistol brace was invented for vets that actually got injured during the Iraqi war that still wanted to shoot. So the pistol brace actually comes open and straps around your wrist to give you stability. So you can shoot that gun one-handed. Because say you lost your arm or you're injured, it's for that purpose. But people start putting it on there just because it actually helps to stabilize a gun, makes you have better aim on a pistol, a shorter weapon. They've had different variants for years, but the modern variant was because of that. Um, it improves your aim slightly. That's it. Well, the Democrats are saying that that's a bad thing. It's going to result in mass shootings, even though none of these mass shootings that take place have had a pistol brace that they know of. None of them have. That's that's just out there. And so Democrats have went against it, and the issue was that people have already bought this. So the ATF comes out and says that, hey, we want you to register your weapon. This is just a way to register your guns. It's a hustle. The other hustle that's going on is that Gavin Newsom guy, the guy you can't stand in California, is trying to pass the 38th Amendment, where it gets rid of ARs for everybody in the whole country, that kind of stuff. So whenever people say like, yeah, they're trying to take your weapons, you're like, no, they're not. Yes, they are. But uh, it doesn't make that big a difference. This is just a point overreach by the ATF. And if people don't speak up, then the ATF will keep doing this stuff. You don't want the ATF to go knocking on your door to ask you what kind of weapon you got or where'd you get it from. And that's what's next. So you got to be careful about that. But they have been losing their power steadily because of this. Now, back to what I was saying about the civil disobedience. If you got 40 million people with pistol braces, like I got rid of mine because I'm like, I don't want to go to jail. But you got 40 million people. This was legal when I bought it. When I bought
Wait a
that,
minute.
it was legal.
You said you got rid of it because you didn't want to go to jail. Why you
Yeah.
just put it in a box in your house and just seal it and lock it up for a later day?
Oh, so okay, so that's because there's I forgot the term. There's two terms they use. It's accessibility and intent. Basically, they're trying to govern the intent. So I have a gun that this goes to that I can possibly put it on. And now, if I take it to my mom's house, who doesn't have one of those guns, she's perfectly legal. But if you have a gun that this can be put on, then there's a thing called intent, and they're governing intent and all this other shit.
Listen,
So hold it, I'm not done
dig
yet.
a hole in
So
your mom's house in the backyard. Put a box in there. Throw all that shit in there. Lock it. Bury it.
100. But how many years do you think I'll get if I get caught having them together?
How will you get caught if it's buried in the ground?
No. I'm asking. So you'll get 10 years. Right now, they're threatening to give you 10 years if you have a pistol brace and a pistol that it goes to. Like I said, how did it go from being legal when I bought it, and then you give me an amnesty period? But amnesty period means that it was illegal to begin with, which it was never illegal. So it's being argued by several organizations. Um, one of the Republicans that was down at first, he changed up because he thought it was going to get him some pub. They went nuts on him. Now he's scared. Now he's like, oh no. So literally, there is a pistol brace bill about to pop up. That's going to. Oh well, excuse me. They're trying to do an injunction on the pistol brace bill that the Democrats have put out there. But like I said, the reason I'm bringing this up is not for the reason of the pistol brace itself. It's how that when you see this civil disobedience, when you have, like I said, either 4 million people or 40 million people who have these braces that are not registering them, that is showing you like, hey, I'm not about to register this shit. This is bullshit. This is an overreach. And the reason that's important is
How
because,
do
like
they
I
even
said,
know you got it though? Because it's just a brace,
they
so
don't.
it's not a firearm. So if you just go and buy it from the store, nobody knows shit. It's like go buy an apple. So I need a fucking permit to buy this fucking apple? No, you just go buy an apple.
Hey, look, I can hear you. Just talk about it is making you mad because it doesn't make sense. Because like you will be, hey, Rand, hey, duct tape, make it make sense. I can't because it
You
doesn't.
want to hear some
You
crazy
just
shit? They took down our show, the 24 karat gold treehouse, because we were talking about a pill. That thing that they spray on food.
yeah,
Yeah, that they took
make
it
it last
down.
longer. No,
But
because you
go back to the gun brace though, because If you just go to a gun store and you buy this shit, I don't have to show ID.
Nope. I got a funnier one for you. So, don't laugh. So you know I go to these Amazon stores. So I'm looking in the box and I see a pistol brace and I buy it for $5. Then I take it to the pawn shop. They gave me $40 plus 3 or 4 magazines, like four magazines, because that pistol brace that I just took them cost $212. Yeah, that's how much they cost. They're not cheap, but but he said, look, man, you know they're about to make these illegal. I said, I know, but you're gonna buy it from me anyway, ain't you? He said, yeah, I'll buy it.
Because guess
Because
what he's gonna do? He's gonna get a box. He's gonna put it in that box
bury it in the backyard.
in the backyard.
And then when they come back illegal, he's gonna sell them. He's going to sell the shit out of them. But and the reason I'll give an example. Like I said, I wasn't trying to go this route. I was really trying to tell people about that food thing he just talked about. That thing he just appealed. You got to be careful because that guy is trying to put stuff in your food that you're not asking for. And I want everybody in America to have their own garden because they're trying to put this in front of Congress right now. Where if you have a garden, you have to register your garden with us. I want every house in America, everybody who can hear my voice. You got to have your own garden. You got to grow it. You got to make these motherfuckers tell you to register your food. Make them tell you that. Right now, my daughter has a strawberry bush. She has okra. She's like, "Hey, Dad, you want to come get this okra?" Like I got them planting they shit right now. You understand? I want everybody to plant because if everybody's doing it, they can't regulate it. That civil disobedience is the most important part of this constitutional thing that we can do. We're protesting. I'm not being violent by growing no damn plant, am I?
No, that's why it's called civil disobedience.
And so, but these people who have this pistol brace, we bought those when they were legal. You changed the narrative, the ATF. Nobody voted for the ATF. The ATF are people who get that job, but without being voted for. It's not the same thing. And what you're doing is you're pushing a narrative that these are bad and that these Democrats want to take your guns. And everybody's like, no, they don't. Yes, they do. Because that's the one thing that makes this whole shit even. Even Stevens, I can fight you on equal ground. So please, you got to get these heirloom plants. You got to start saving your own seeds. When you buy stuff before they start genetically modifying it, save your seeds. Put that shit away. Get a bag of that shit. This sounds so corny, and y'all think I'm crazy, but having your own seeds is going to be the most important thing that saves us from
Honestly,
this imperial.
buying those things are immensely valuable, and here's why.
Mm.
Because say you want to have carrots, and you want to have squash, and you want to have watermelon, and you want to have broccoli, you want to have collard greens, and you have enough space in your backyard, we'll say 5 feet by 5 feet, to put 10 rows and have 10 different types of crops growing there. You can have food that you can put in your cellar, that you can put in a root cellar or in your basement, and you don't have to keep it warm, you keep it cool. And you keep it in the basement, and you can actually can that food, so that if you find yourself in a situation where you're on hard times and you need money and the food supply is cut off, well, you can eat. See, a lot of people talk about the Great Depression, and they talk about how all these white people were starving to death, they couldn't find work. Black people actually did okay because we come from an agrarian culture of working on farms. And so by the time the Dust Bowl had happened, that you had an entire 2 generations that were removed from slavery. So that means a father and a grandfather, or a grandmother and great-grandmother, that taught you how to farm, how to grow food, or you had experience working on somebody's farm just to make money. And then you moved to the city. Like I was talking about the Great Migration that happened from 1917 to 1970. And so these black people who left the South, they had skills. They knew how to feed themselves. They knew how to hunt for food. They knew how to fish. And so these people did not suffer during the Great Depression because they had learned the ways of husbandry coming up
They,
as a child.
they could fish, they could hunt. If you want to see an example, look at the effect World War I had on Africa. It didn't have one because everybody was rural. They didn't care. But then all of a sudden, during World War II, Africans started moving to these cities. All of a sudden, they started getting into these conflicts. And sometimes not every conflict is for you. But when you're rural, you have your own food supply, you have your own water supply, and you own your own land. You're not dependent on a big invisible government to take care of you.
Duct tape. Listen, man. Let's seriously walk the walk. I think you should go out today and pick a spot, a corner in that backyard. And what I think you should do before you even start digging is go to Lowe's or Home Depot, get yourself those green metal stakes, and hammer them into the ground about a foot down, because that'll keep moles out. And then dig in that area, and you're going to put the chicken wire around those green metal stakes. And then what that's going to do is going to keep your dogs out of it. Your dogs will not, listen, your dogs will not be able to dig underneath that. So dogs or moles or any creatures will not be able to dig into that. And then what you can do is just plant a small crop, man, and figure out like what it is you want to eat.
Oh no, I already got the seeds and everything. What I was using was I got some old totes from when I moved. I was putting them in the old totes and just filling them full of soil. So that's what I was actually doing right now.
But let me tell you, that's cool for a small crop. But what you got to understand is like when you put something in the ground, those roots can go way deep. And so, listen, so the more room they have to go down into the earth, the taller they will become above the earth. So remember that.
Look, you forget how big them damn tomato plants I had when I was a kid. We were always having tomatoes. I've always had food from a garden.
But that's the thing is like that allows you to have something to trade, to barter with people.
Look, don't let these people convince you that you need them. That's the lie. That's what this whole narrative is. This dissemination of information. The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Henry Fords. They have control.
All of them. But you have to understand that self-sufficiency is you taking your power back. So the more that you can do on your own, the more powerful you become, straight up and down.
You even when you're a child, you grow away from your parents, not because you don't love them. It's because as you become an adult, you don't need them. But if they raise you right, they gave you the skills you need to. But the government ain't like that. It's not weaning you off. The government's offering you a check every couple. Hey man, you got a problem? I'm gonna give you $1,200. Oh, but it's your money because you paid into it. They're giving me my money early. That's all they're doing. They're not doing you a favor. But that's how you because of a situation they created in the first place. It's coming out. I can't even talk about it. It's coming out now that these different pharmaceutical companies ain't the one who developed that thing. That it was. We'll talk about it in another podcast.
But check it out. But here's the deal, though. Tree rings represents years in your life.
Experiences.
You can wear it on your face or you can wear it in your heart. And it's your life experiences, it's the wisdom you've accumulated, and it's the ways you've learned to navigate the world, to not just survive. Because we always talk about, I'm surviving. Get that out of your head. That's basic. Surviving is basic. You got to
you should thrive.
Be thriving. Thriving is eating food that you have grown and having a meal with food that you have grown. Do you know how delicious that food is? It's delicious.
Like when you take your kid fishing, catch that trout, cut the head off, skin it, and cook it that night. That is the most rewarding thing because they've provided everything. Once that kid sees that, like, you know, I get it. Some people don't eat fish, but it's about showing you a skill that can get you through in a bad situation. You know, it's just what it is. It's you're staring at your own independence. It's tangible independence, and when you get that, ain't no going back. You know, there's no like. It's hard to go back living with your mom again. Like, hey, you know, it's hard to go back living with your family again after you've been on your own. Now, sometimes you have to because things happen, and I'm not dissing anybody, but it's really hard to go backwards. And I think one of those things is that recent pandemic. We ain't going backwards. People have. I'm starting my own business. I'm doing this. It's inspired a lot of people. It also lets you know that it had a negative effect that probably wasn't intended. Is the fact that people don't need the government. You need your family, you need your friends, you need your little plot of land, but you don't need the government.
That's all I got. We out. Peace.
Holla back.